Hi, welcome to another edition of What's This Show For? FOR, Friends of Ron. I'm your host, Ron Levitsky. Thou shalt not be a victim, thou shalt not be a perpetrator, but above all, thou shalt not be a bystander. So wrote Yehuda Bauer, a famous noted Holocaust scholar, about what happened to the Jews in Germany, but it could equally apply to other people. A lot of us are content to sort of say, too bad for these people, whoever they are, who are brutalized, murdered, and had genocide committed on them. But there are some people who want to do something about it, in fact, right in our own backyard. One such person is with me today, Laura Taffanetti, who works with a group of people you may have heard about in the news. If not, eventually you will, the Rohingya. I want to welcome Laura. Laura, thanks so much for coming by.
Glad to be here.
I heard you first speak at the Deerfield Rotary and was really impressed both with you personally for what you do, but with the Cultural Center as you described it. So I wanted to get a little bit of taste of both for our audience. Why don't we start off, though, by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
I grew up in Chicago, the northwest side of Chicago. Went to school at the University of Illinois in Chicago, which we called Circle at the time. And then left Chicago because I hated the weather.
Well, that's a good enough reason. I think we can all sympathize with that.
So I went to Los Angeles, started teaching there, and then eventually ended up in Connecticut. So I'm a retired elementary school teacher who taught for 30 years.
And I also understand that you're a playwright?
Yeah. Yes, I'm a playwright, and I've also written children's plays and musicals.
Wonderful. Well, so you have quite a varied career. Let's connect up here with the Rohingya. While we talk about the Rohingya, our lovely director, Pam, could you get up a map, please, of the area? Okay, so here we have an area of Asia where we see India, and that's been in the news lately, unfortunately, with its problems with Pakistan. But to the east of India is a country called Myanmar, which a lot of us know better as Burma, right?
Right.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about geographically where the Rohingya are from?
The Rohingya are from the coast of Burma or Myanmar, and it's mountainous. They grow rice there, and they're fishermen.
Okay, and my understanding of the limited knowledge I have of the Burmese is that the majority of them are Buddhist.
Correct. 90% of them are Buddhist, yeah.
But the Rohingya, that's not so.
Right. The Rohingya are a Muslim minority. There's a number of minorities in Burma, but it appears that the government of Burma or Myanmar would prefer they were an entirely Buddhist country.
Okay, so here is a group of people, and I've read it, they number about 800,000, or at least they did number 800,000.
Actually, I think there's a couple million of them. There's over 1 million that have fled into Bangladesh at this point, and there's about 1 million still left.
Oh, okay, so 1 million left in the country still.
Right.
Okay, and why is it that this particular group has been targeted, do you think?
The government of Myanmar is using religion as a tool to get the people of Burma to hate the Rohingya. They're also actually doing this against the Kachin people who are Christian. The land that the Rohingya live on is land that is rich. It has uranium, it has jade, it has gems, and it's also on the way to the coast. So the country of China is very interested that that road be built. So China has this habit of finding countries that are financially strapped, lending them lots of money, and then forcing them to do things they want. So that's part of what's going on right now. But there's been a history against the Rohingya and the Burmese for a long time. Part of it is their religious beliefs, but part of it is when Burma was taken, when it was a colony of Britain. Britain used they interacted mostly with the Rohingya because they lived in the tea growing area, and they ignored the monks of the Burmese So,
Majority, okay.
yeah, right. And so that caused animosity. And when Britain finally left Myanmar, which was still Burma at that time, they left their weapons with the Rohingya with the understanding that they would fight with the Allies. And the Buddhists sided with the Japanese.
Wow. So there's a lot of, I can tell, ill feeling then.
Right.
What forms of discrimination or persecution have the Rohingya been facing in Myanmar?
There's always been violence against them, but in 1982 they lost their citizenship. And that meant they lost their right to an education, they lost their right to move from place to place. They can't protect themselves against police or anybody that decides to do anything bad against them. They have no rights.
And I was surprised to learn that the Nobel Prize winner from Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was a symbol of democracy, has sort of made excuses for the military government against the Rohingya.
She's done worse than that, actually. I think nobody realized how much she hated the Rohingya people, but the government position is that because they're Muslim, all Muslims are terrorists, and they are always blaming the Rohingya for ending up killing themselves. She has done nothing to prevent the villages from being burned, the women from being raped, the men from being killed, the babies being thrown into burning buildings. She's done nothing to stop any of that.
Has the U.S. government done anything, either good or bad?
The U.S. government opened trade with Myanmar when they didn't realize how bad things were. This was under Obama. Since then, there have been a number of senators that have tried to bring a bill to the floor to sanction Myanmar, but it's not being allowed to come to the floor because Senator McConnell doesn't want to insult Aung San Suu Kyi because he's a fan of hers.
Okay, well, that'd be another
That's
discussion.
another story, right.
Okay, can we go back to the map, please? And let's talk about, our ancestors, all of our ancestors had to make that trip from wherever they came from to America.
Right.
And you hear harrowing stories. Looking at this map, it looks to me like it must have been pretty tough for the Rohingya to get to Chicago. I mean, can you kind of talk us through what might be some of the routes that they took?
Right. There's two main. Any Rohingya that you meet outside of Myanmar had to have escaped to get out of there. There were two ways to do it. They could walk up to Bangladesh and then fly from Bangladesh to Thailand and then walk from Thailand to Malaysia. Or they could take boats to Malaysia. Both of those ways are really dangerous. Both of those ways are illegal. They have no papers. If they took a boat across the Bay of Bengal, the boats were rickety. There were pirates that would attack them. There were people that would arrange to take them out and then just leave them out there. So that was a really dangerous way to go. If you go into Bangladesh, you would have to have human traffickers that would take you from Bangladesh to Thailand. Thailand used to take, they used to allow refugees, but then they stopped. So the only safe place for them to go that's nearby is Malaysia.
And once let's say they were lucky enough to get to Malaysia, so how did they go from Malaysia to, say, a Western country like the U.S.?
Okay. Well, a lot of people were stuck in Malaysia for a long time because they didn't have refugee status, and I mean like 20 years. At some point, the UN came in and recognized that they were refugees, and so once you get that status, then you have to go through the extreme vetting, and then you're allowed to go to the countries that are willing to take you. So the people that I work with, they left from Malaysia, they came into Chicago, and the government decides where there are places people can go, and they're looking for places that have jobs, that have a lot of available housing. And so there are large groups of Rohingya in Chicago, Milwaukee, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Buffalo, New York, and then others scattered about.
When you say large numbers, let's say for Chicago,
we have about 1,500 people living in Chicago, about the same up in Milwaukee, I think 90 families up in Buffalo and 60 families in Fort Wayne.
Okay. Let's talk about once they come to Chicago, it must be such a phenomenal culture shock.
And they usually get here in the winter.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What are some of the biggest shocks or surprises or adjustments that generally they would have to make?
Right. Okay. When you come here, you come in with the resettlement agency, and the resettlement agency has money to help you get established. So they help you between 3 and 6 months find an apartment, pay for the apartment until you get a job, give you ESL classes, get you the basics. But for this community, that's not enough. This community is particularly vulnerable. What's different is there is no established Rohingya organization that has been here a long time. There's no middle class or upper class Rohingya people. So there's no Rohingya people that can say, hey, I can find you a job, I can find you an apartment, I can translate for you. So that's...
Is there any connection with Muslim communities in Chicago?
Yeah, where they live is a strong Muslim area, but the big stressor for them is the language barrier. They speak 3 very rare languages. They speak Rohingya, which is unwritten, they speak Burmese, and they speak Malay, or any combination of those. And the Muslim community in general speaks Urdu. So there isn't anyone that was able to help translate for them in the beginning. And if you're dealing with the gas company or the electric company, the insurance, there was no translators there to help them. If they got mail, there was nobody to translate the mail for them.
How about other, I'm thinking in terms of like the climate. Have they seen snow?
Before they came here, no. And I'm sure the first time they saw it, they went, wow, it's snowing. And now all I hear is it's too cold. It's actually too hot in the winter for them and too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. They're from a very temperate climate.
Okay, and what about foods, cuisine?
The area that they live in is called Little India in Chicago. The shops there have the food that they're comfortable cooking with, so it's a wonderful area that they've all settled in. Their food is the one piece of their culture that has survived, that they're very proud of, and it's hot as blazes. It's really hot, spicy food. Rice and meat and cabbage and...
Some kind of curry or some kind of...
Yeah, it's not Indian food. It's their own thing.
Okay.
Right.
Are there any Rohingyan restaurants?
Yes, there's a new one that just opened up on Devon Avenue called...
well, we don't want we shouldn't say.
Sorry.
We shouldn't say, but people could find it.
Okay.
People could find it.
Yes.
Okay, that's really interesting. And what about traditional Rohingyan life? Is it patriarchal? Is the father the head of the family? Is the mother the head? How does that work? And what has happened since coming to America?
It is patriarchal. The women's position is usually having children and raising them, though if they were farmers, the women would work, with that. So that's an interesting transition that I see happening because some of our women are now working, and that's unusual for that community, but financially they need to be able to do that.
The younger girls, is there a conflict because on the one hand they're from a traditional family, but they look around them and see women kind of performing the same kind of functions as men?
Actually, traditionally, culturally, the women marry young, like 15. So some of our girls marry and drop out of high school at a young age, and some of them are going to college. So we're all over the board there on that.
Okay, well, we may talk a little bit more about this, but we want to eventually get to the Cultural Center and talk about what you all do. Let's talk about how you got involved. I mean, this is really a fascinating group of people, but it's like, how did you know about them? How did you get involved with them?
like I said, I'm a retired teacher, and I saw on a listserv a need for tutors to help kids with their homework. I knew nothing about the Rohingya. I'd never heard of them before. And as reluctantly as possible, I said to my husband, we should go and do this. And I just fell in love with it. It was so much fun. But working with a large number of kids wasn't a good fit for me. So I offered to teach ESL to adults instead. And as I was doing that, and my students were getting comfortable with me, they started bringing me their mail. And that's when I realized that my ability to read and write was invaluable to these people. When you are poor, the government communicates with you through the mail. So if you're getting food stamps or if you're on Medicaid, you get letters in the mail, and every so often you have to, like every 3 months, you have to fill out forms and get them in at a certain deadline. They were missing those deadlines, and their food stamps were getting cut off because nobody had told them that letters that have this logo on them are important.
So there's nobody, you'd think there'd be someone from the government, whatever, federal or who would take it upon themselves to make sure that these people are getting the information. I mean, understanding, getting meaning understand.
That's a whole, no, there isn't.
Really?
No, and if you went to Department of Human Services, there's nobody there that can translate for them. The lack of translators for these people is a huge disadvantage.
Wow. And in terms of bureaucracy, I guess from where they're from, must be somewhat different from the bureaucracy here, just this way it's set
Very
up.
different. They come from an area where bribery is the normal way of doing
Well,
things.
you're living in Chicago.
Yeah. I would say 95% of them are illiterate in any language because they were not allowed to go to school. And that's an unbelievable way of taking away people's power. So that they are struggling all the time to make sense of the world that they're in. And just dumb stuff like trying to make sense of insurance. If you ever tried to make sense of insurance for yourself,
yes.
Right,
Yes.
and the insurance companies won't let us speak for our people. At this point, they want to use their translators, which they now have. But what they're talking about is so foreign to these people that you could put it in their language, they still won't understand what you're talking about.
And medical treatments?
Medical treatment's a real problem because the people can't speak to the doctors clearly, and the doctors can't speak to the people clearly. So I do believe a lot of our people are over-medicated just because of that lack of ability to speak to each other, to say nothing of mental health issues.
Yeah, I'm sure with the tragedies that they've seen.
Right.
Let's talk about the center, the time we have left. You mentioned a remarkable young man who founded the center, Nasser Zakaria?
Zakaria. Yeah.
Zakaria. Could you tell us a little bit about this gentleman?
Sure. Nasir escaped Burma when he was 14. He'd been captured by the military and brought into the jungle with a number of people to do some work for them, and he knew they were going to kill them when he was finished, so he escaped in the middle of the night and his father sold his business to give him the money so that he could get traffickers to get him out of Myanmar. He ended up in Malaysia for about 20 years. When he finally came to the United States, he was married. He had a daughter and his grandfather. They all came to Chicago with him. He came in 2012. Most of them started arriving in Chicago in 2012. He became a dishwasher at the Rivers Casino, and that's where he learned to speak English. He's got a 5th grade education. But he recognized that his people needed their own space where they could preserve their culture and where they could get help in their own language. So he went to the Zakat Foundation of America, and they funded half of our business expenses, and that's why we exist.
Wonderful. We have about a half dozen pictures that you provided for us, so let's run through them, and you could talk a little about what's going on at the center.
Sure.
So we can have the first one. Okay.
All right, so this is our center. This young man is doing his homework. We have about 70 kids who come to get homework help every night. Their parents can't help them because they're illiterate, and so we have a bunch of volunteers that help the kids out.
So where do they get their clothing? Because it seems traditional. I mean, are there places to purchase it, or their mothers make it?
No, it's just in that community they would be more traditional, and the hats are traditional for the Islam.
Okay, okay. Next one, please. Do you have there.
That's Nasir. He's the one that started the center,
Oh.
and that's his son Muhammad, who is now 2.
And what does he do now?
Nasir?
Yeah.
He runs the center. He's the director of the center,
Okay,
right?
great.
What's remarkable about him is that he's always looking to the future. I think it's very difficult for refugees to look to the future because they're so busy trying to survive the present. But Nasir is always looking forward.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Next, please. We're running a little slow on the. Oh, there we go.
There. We have this program called Mommy and Me, and this guy is one of our people. This area here that you're looking at is our main gathering area. We have large dinners where we feed hundreds of people.
Really?
We've had weddings there. The desk in the back is where one of our workers, who's a Rohingya woman who graduated from high school, and she's going to college now. And she helps people with caseworks. She's able to speak to them in their language, so she's able to help them with their paperwork and stuff like that. This young man is one of the people who comes to our Mommy and Me class. I think there's another picture of that.
Okay, I think we do have one of Mommy and Me.
Yeah.
Next, please. It looks pretty large. Okay.
Oh, no, that's our soccer team. I forgot to tell you about the soccer team. We have a teenage soccer team and 3 boy teams. And they're really important. It's the one sport that the community loves, and it helps keep our kids connected to their heritage and helps keep our kids out of trouble.
When you say connected to the heritage, is soccer big in Myanmar?
Yes, that's the thing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
well then they fit right in, and
Yeah.
it's growing popularity here. Okay, next one, please. So they must have won some kind of award. There's a nice trophy. Terrific.
This is a women's group where we were teaching women how to do different things like use a sewing machine, bake a cake, make sewless blankets, all different kinds of stuff like that.
So we'll stay on this for a minute. So do the women, do you think that they have changed at all in terms of their attitude towards their families and towards life in general? I mean, because again, we talk about traditional work, but they're seeing change all around them.
Well, most of our people came from Malaysia, which is a more sophisticated country, so they're not having as much a difficulty as those people who come quicker. If you left Myanmar and came to this country, that transition I think would be harder. But most of our people came through Malaysia and were in Malaysia for a while. If they came with their families, they are more successful. Those who are individuals, it's more of a struggle.
And they whatever they make, the garments, the crafts they're making, are they for their families? Are they for sale? Or community?
No, it's not. People are always asking me for crafts, but it's not. They have not lived in a situation where they've had the freedom or the luxury to create things of beauty and to create crafts. You know, if those who grew up in Malaysia, if they had grown up there long enough, they would be able to bring crafts with them. But most of them grew up in Malaysia,
Okay.
and that culture is gone.
Last one, please. I think I have one more slide. Do they learn how to use their sewing machines quickly? All right, okay.
One of the things that we're trying to do, this is an ESL class, one of the things that we're trying to do is establish a virtual food pantry rather than having the actual food there, which is so labor intensive and often ends up giving people food they don't normally eat. work raising money and buying gift cards and handing those out to people, and that seems to work much better.
Okay, so then they're able to buy their own
Whatever,
food with
right.
what they're used to, and this is just a typical group of people, because I see it's mostly, it seems like there's more women there.
Yeah, there are more women. This is an older group of people. There's a burden. This is an interesting tidbit. You're not allowed to become a citizen until you've lived in the country for 5 years. If you're here and you're on disability, so you're collecting Social Security, if you've never worked in this country, you have 7 years to become a citizen, and if you don't, you lose your benefits, and then you're really on your own. Trying to teach people how to pass for citizenship when they don't know how to read and write in any language is a real challenge. And if you're older, trying to learn a new language anyway is a real challenge.
When a person would take the test for citizenship, is the test always in English?
Yes. Yes, if you've lived here for 20 years, they will let you have a translator. But our people have only been here since 2012.
I see. Wow. Did you have much training to be an ESL teacher?
No, but I'm a teacher, and teachers can do anything.
I agree with you. So we have just a minute or two. What do you want to add something?
Well, there's one program that I really
Please,
am proud
please.
of. We started a Mommy and Me class because it became clear to me that the children were learning English at school, and the dads were learning English at work, but the moms weren't learning English because they couldn't take their children to an ESL class. The moms also have never experienced school. This is a really hard thing to wrap your head around, but they've never experienced school. So for them to be able to prepare their children for preschool or kindergarten, they had no idea what that was they were preparing them for. So we started this program. It's basically a collapsible preschool. We set it up twice a week, and the kids come. There's developmentally appropriate toys. We introduce books and songs, and all of this is all new for everybody. When I first met these people, my experience with kids is you sit down on the floor with a book and a kid will climb in your lap. That absolutely was not the case, because the kids had no idea that books were wonderful because they had never experienced them. And the moms were afraid of them because they knew they couldn't read it, and they were afraid it would make them look stupid. The program started last June. At this point, when I hand out books, the kids are thrilled to get them. The moms sit down with the kids and they talk about the pictures. All of that is the growth in these kids and the moms has been outstanding. I'm really proud of this program.
Wonderful, and it'll help prepare the kids for school.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful. Any closing thoughts? Because we're just about out of time.
I love working there. They've made me their family. It's made my retirement rich.
And people can look for the Rohingya Cultural Center in Rogers Park.
Yep.
And be easily able to find it. And are they welcome to drop by, or should they call first? Or
Oh, we're always willing to talk to people as long as you accept the fact that we're busy.
Of course, of course. And